Good evening. You arrive here a little worn at the edges, the kind of tired that hums under your skin even when you sit still. Your shoulders remember every small annoyance of the day, and your mind keeps replaying tasks you did not finish and messages you still have not answered. You know you cannot keep sprinting forever, and if you are honest, you probably will not survive this week in one piece if you continue pretending everything is fine. So you give yourself this one quiet pause. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and let me know how your day has really been. Your worries, your exhaustion, or even a tiny joy that made you smile. I'm here to truly listen and offer the most sincere, heartfelt advice I can. Now, turn off the lights. Take a deep, slow breath. Let your tiredness melt away, and gently close your eyes. Let's drift together into tonight's dreamlike lands. And tomorrow morning, if you still remember, send me a message and tell me what you dreamed. You breathe out, and the familiar room around you fades to the edges like scenery before a curtain falls. Screens, deadlines, and noisy thoughts retreat, not gone, but politely waiting outside the doorway of your attention. In their place comes a cooler air, thin and clean, carrying the faint smell of pine and distant wood smoke. You feel the firmness of a narrow mountain path beneath your feet, and far below, out of sight, water murmurs over stone in a steady undertone, like the background music of a gentler world. You lift your gaze, and autumn is already leaning over the slopes around you. Maples cling to the hillside, leaves turned into crimson, persimmon, and muted gold, as if each one has spent the whole summer quietly storing sunlight. A breeze moves through them, and the rustle of drying leaves is soft and papery, like the turning of 100 pages at once. Above, the sky thins from warm amber into a hushed blue-gray that seems to cool your breathing just by looking at it. As the path curves, the valley opens. A small settlement rests in the hollow of the land, its dark tiled roofs stepped neatly along the gentler slope. Beyond the clustered houses, rice fields spread in terraces, their stalks bowed with nearly ripe grain, pale heads catching the last of the light. Mist gathers in the low places, softening edges and blurring distances until everything looks like it has been wrapped in gauze, and you feel your own thoughts wrapped up with it. You cross a wooden bridge into the village, feeling the subtle give of planks worn smooth by many years of passing feet. Beneath you, the river threads among rounded stones, carrying broken reflections of the sky and the first glimmers of lantern light from nearby houses. A few red leaves float lazily along the surface, turning in slow circles, surrendering without resistance to wherever the current takes them, and you notice your worries beginning to imitate them, drifting instead of clinging. The air inside the village is layered and calm. You breathe in the steam of cooking rice, the earthiness of damp soil from the fields, the sharper scent of cut straw drying under eaves. Somewhere, incense lingers from an altar you cannot see, a delicate thread of fragrance that tugs gently at your attention and then lets it go. Without trying, you begin to move at the same unhurried tempo as everything around you, your steps quieter, your chest a little less tight. As you walk along the main lane, you pass thresholds where warm light falls in long rectangles onto packed earth, and neatly stacked bundles of firewood lean against walls, already preparing for colder nights. Sacred straw ropes circle the trunks of old trees, marking them as quiet guardians of many turning seasons, and you feel almost shyly, as if you have been allowed into a secret that usually stays local. Higher up the slope, beyond roofs and branches, the outline of a temple appears against the dimming sky. Wide eaves stretched outward like still wings, and a heavy bell hangs motionless, holding its first strike of the night in patient silence. Stone steps lead toward it in a calm, straight line, and you sense that this place is where all the small motions of evening will slowly gather around you. You let the main lane slip behind you, following a side path that threads between low houses with sun-faded walls. The ground under your feet is smooth and cool, packed by years of passing souls. Ahead, a muted glow presses against the deepening dusk, not a sharp beam, but a soft blur, like the faint light that slips under a bedroom door when you are almost asleep. Under a run of eaves you find the source. Rows of paper lanterns waiting to be lit. They hang from hooks and thin bamboo bars, turning slightly whenever the evening air stirs. The paper is thick and creamy, threaded with tiny fibers that catch the last hints of color from the sky. Simple brush strokes lie across their surfaces, maple leaves, flowing waves, rounded hills. None of it demands attention, yet each lantern holds a quiet confidence, as if it already knows the role it will play tonight. The path opens into a small courtyard tucked between wooden houses. Here, the Equinox preparations gather into focus. Slender poles lie in straight bundles. Coils of hemp rope rest beside them, ends carefully tucked. Low tables hold bowls, folded slips of paper, and bunches of fresh pine twigs. The pine releases a cool, resinous scent that rises above the softer smells of rice and straw, and your lungs register it with something like relief, as if they have finally been handed the right kind of air. Around you, hands move with unhurried repetition. Bamboo frames are lifted, their ribs tap softly together. Paper shells are slipped over them, creases smoothed, knots tied. Some lanterns take on family crests, strong circles of ink. Others receive grains of rice, chrysanthemums, or clouds. Each becomes a small carried shrine, ordinary enough to belong to a village lane, careful enough to mark this night as different from all the others sliding past in the year. The pace of the work ignores the rush that usually drives your days. There is no urgency here, only completion. The sky deepens into blue that leans toward black. A flame touches one wick, then another. Light opens inside the lanterns, first as a shy crescent clinging to one side, then as a rounded, steady glow. This light does not try to conquer the darkness, it simply pushes it back a little and accepts the rest. The courtyard settles into pools of soft brightness, lanterns hovering like low moons, their reflections caught in the polished grain of old wood. Among the evening smells, a new thread appears, the dry, sweet scent of pine needles beginning to smolder. From a small charcoal brazier, thin smoke rises in pale strands, climbing until it loosens and vanishes. You follow its movement almost automatically, noticing how it leaves without struggle, how it does not cling to what it has already touched. For once, your own thoughts imitate it, lifting and thinning instead of circling in tight, anxious loops. Near the brazier stands a low wooden platform at the edge of a doorway. On it, lacquered trays hold modest offerings, a small mound of white rice shaped with deliberate care, a few slices of pickled vegetable, a piece of fish, half an orange turned upward so its segments catch the lantern light. In front, a tiny cup of clear liquid waits, surface still. The food is ordinary, the sort that would disappear quickly on any rushed day, but here each piece has been chosen and placed as if every detail matters. You understand, without anyone signaling it, that this is not for the people who still move through these rooms. It is set for those whose hands once worked these fields and courtyards, who no longer step over these thresholds, but are not considered gone. Grandparents, great-grandparents, relatives whose faces live mostly in stories. This simple tray says they are still invited, still remembered, still counted. The gesture does not cancel loss, but it quietly rejects the idea that death is only erasing. As you move back toward the main lane, you see more small altars beside doorways, some with only a bowl and a single stick of incense, ember like a tiny red eye. Others with folded papers shaped like robes or boats, as if unseen guests might need clothing or passage. From each, smoke rises in narrow, steady columns, mapping routes into a world that cannot be photographed or pinned on any map, but is navigated here with complete, unhurried certainty. Lantern, smoke, bowl, doorway. The details accumulate inside you like smooth stones. By the time you step out of the courtyard, the village feels subtly doubled, the everyday and the unseen layered over one another. And somewhere inside, you notice that you too are beginning to stand in more than one place at once. The tired present of your life and this thinner, quieter edge of time where the equinox night is just beginning to breathe. You slip back into the side path as if you have always known where it leads, feet remembering the direction before your thoughts catch up. The rhythm of the village has slowed. Work sounds have thinned to the occasional clack of wood, the soft shuffle of straw sandals on packed earth. Above the clustered roofs, the temple silhouette waits, patient and unmoving, like a calm parent watching children finish their games before calling them in. You follow a stone lane that begins to climb. Houses fall away, replaced by tall cedars that draw the last light out of the air and hold it in thin bands high above you. Between them, the path becomes a sequence of worn stone steps, edges rounded from countless careful feet. Your breath settles into the pattern they set. Step, step, small exhale. Step, step, small exhale. The world that usually yanks you from notification to notification shrinks to this simple exchange between lungs and stone. At the base of the temple precinct, a wooden gate spans the path. Its beams are darkened by rain and time, the grain raised in long, slow waves you can almost feel under your fingers. Beneath its crossbeam, a rope of twisted straw hangs, pale and firm, with folded white paper streamers dipping from it in small zigzags. You pause without planning to, aware that you are crossing from the everyday slope into a portion of the mountain that has been deliberately set apart. It is not dramatic, No thunder rolls, no choir begins a soundtrack just for you. The shift is quieter, like the moment when you finally stop scrolling and briefly notice your own breathing again. Beyond the gate, the air cools and stills. Someone has swept the stone courtyard until it is almost startlingly clean, every stray leaf guided to the edges. A broom leans against the outer wall, bristles tied neatly, handle worn smooth where hands have gripped it in the same spots for years. Near the entrance, a low stone basin holds clear water that reflects the sky and a trembling rectangle. Set beside it, wooden dippers lie in a precise row, their handles aligned, waiting. You move as the others move. Water scoops and pours, touching hands, rinsing fingertips, cooling your palms. A little falls back into the basin, sending rings outward that catch lantern light in quick flashes. The act is simple, the kind of thing you could rush or skip in your usual rushing life, but here it becomes a way of telling your body that it has arrived, that it can stop carrying the grit and static from everything that happened before this evening. Inside the precinct, the preparations continue in calm, looping patterns. To one side, an attendant passes a cloth slowly over the surface of a great bronze bell. The bell's flanks hold images softened by time, ridges and symbols worn gentle under many cloths like this one. Each stroke is unhurried, following the curve with the same care you might use to brush hair away from a sleeping child's forehead. The metal catches the lantern glow, not with a sharp shine, but with a deep, internal gleam, as if the bell remembers every sound it has ever released into the valley. Farther along the veranda, hands smooth fabric on a low altar table. White cloth falls without wrinkles. Red cords lie exactly where they should. Lacquered boxes, polished stands, and small gleaming vessels are set out in careful symmetry. Nothing is ornate for its own sake. Every object has a role in the choreography of the coming rites, as if the temple itself is practicing its lines before the performance of the equinox night. You realize that your own life rarely leaves this much room for preparation. You tend to hurtle from one thing to the next and hope your mind will improvise. Here, everything rehearses until it is ready. Along the outer corridor, helpers move with bundles of fresh straw, adding cushions where knees will rest, adjusting lantern positions so their light will fall in gentle pools. The faint rustle of straw, the soft thud of footfalls on wood, the occasional quiet clink of ceramic on lacquer drift together into a kind of slow domestic music. You notice that no motion is wasted, but nothing is pushed. Time stretches, not like a rubber band about to snap, but like a strip of cloth being gently smoothed out. Somewhere inside, a quieter version of you begins to match this measured pace. The anxious part, the one that tries to optimize every moment and multitask, even while resting, still mutters in the background, but here it sounds almost ridiculous, like someone trying to sprint through a lullaby. You cannot rush the arrival of the equinox any more than you can hurry the ripening of grain or the turning of leaves. The temple preparations teach you this without a single word. Some shifts in the world happen only when time is allowed to expand, when brooms sweep slowly, when bells are polished as if there is nowhere else to be. You drift away from the temple precinct as if carried by the same quiet current that lifted the incense smoke. The stone steps guide you downward, steady under your feet, and instead of returning to the cluster of roofs and lanes, you follow a narrow track that slips between shadowed houses and then escapes them entirely. In front of you, the valley opens, no longer a village, but a broad, breathing pattern of terraces and sky. The last trace of daylight lies low on the horizon, a worn strip of gold sinking into violet. In that soft, uncertain band, the rice fields spread outward in shallow shelves, following the curve of the hillside like slow, even breaths. The stalks are tall now, tips bowed with almost ripe grain. Months of work are pressed into each stem. Cold spring mud, hot summer sun, small decisions made with eyes narrowed toward the weather. None of that effort is visible, yet it hums under the surface like a memory in the body. You step on to the low earthen ridge that divides one paddy from the next, the ground cool and faintly damp beneath your soles. On either side, thin layers of water hoard scraps of lantern light from the village behind you, each tremor breaking their reflections. Around you, the first crickets begin, scattered notes that quickly knit into a steady, woven chorus. It is unplanned and ordinary, yet it fits the darkening fields so perfectly that you feel the night has finally clicked into place. The crickets begin to register more fully, their shared rhythms settling around you without asking permission. Their chirping does not wait for your attention. It simply fills the air because the light has thinned and the air has cooled. No one has curated it, yet it fits this moment with suspicious precision. It drapes over your shoulders like an invisible shawl, ordinary and at the same time strangely exact, as if this night has finally found the volume that suits it. You stand still and let the scene balance itself around you. The bowed heads of grain, heavy but not yet cut. The layered chorus of insects, insistent but not frantic. The pale disk of the moon pushing through a veil of cloud, its reflection fragmenting in the restless water below. This is threshold time. Day and night lean toward an equal share. Summer and winter begin their slow handover. Even your exhaustion and your small, tough core of resilience seem to negotiate a truce you rarely let them attempt. Farther along the ridge, a lone lantern glows where the path widens. Drawn toward its halo, you find a small stone platform lifted above the damp soil. A folded cloth lies on top, corners pinned with smooth pebbles. On the cloth, a bundle of rice stalks tied with straw, a shallow dish with a few seasonal fruits, and a narrow wooden tablet standing upright, ink brushed across its face. You do not need to read the characters to understand the message. This is thanks, offered as close as possible to the work that has fed everyone all year. You realize that the equinox here is less a neat diagram of day and night than a quiet accounting of effort and result. What ripened? What failed? What somehow survived? The people who tend these terraces know storms and insects and bad luck. They know that work does not always bloom into reward, and yet at this hinge of the year they still pause to acknowledge what has made it through without pretending the rest never existed. For once, your own mind cooperates. Instead of replaying unfinished tasks and small disasters, it begins a different inventory. The conversation you finally stopped avoiding, the habit that has loosened its hold, the rare day you rested without composing an apology in your head. None of these are spectacular, but together they feel like a modest harvest, a field of small, stubborn stalks you have never quite dared to call success. The fields around you refuse to pretend that gratitude magically repairs everything. Along the edges, you notice stunted patches where seedlings never took, places where water pooled and soured the soil, sections where stalks lie flattened and stripped. The landscape shows its failures in the same frame as its abundance, asking no one to look away. You feel something in you unclench at that honesty. You too are a map of thriving stretches and ruined corners, and here both are allowed to stand together in the same soft dusk. The crickets keep going, indifferent to your private accounting, their sound rising and falling like small waves against the slope. A faint chill finds the back of your neck. Somewhere wood creaks as an irrigation gate is checked, and stone taps softly on stone as another offering is set upon another ridge. None of these gestures can command perfect weather or a quiet future. They simply weave thin threads of care and gratitude through the dark. You turn back along the ridge at last, letting the insect chorus escort you toward the scattered lanterns of the village. The fields behind you dim into a patchwork of dark water and pale grain. Inside your chest, the old heaviness has not disappeared, but it has shifted, as if someone moved a stone just enough to give your heart a little extra room to breathe, a small private equinox you can feel but cannot quite name. You wander back through the lantern-strewn lanes, guided less by direction than by the slow pulse of distant temple bells, marking another passing hour. Their sound folds through the night like soft waves of bronze, each tone fading into the next until silence and echo become impossible to tell apart. Somewhere near the heart of the village, a warm glow leaks from a wide-eaved house, and your feet, without consulting you, follow it. Inside the open courtyard, a gathering hums with patient energy. Elders, wrapped in layered robes of cotton and hemp, sit cross-legged beside low tables. Between them, children move in small purposeful flurries, carrying baskets of flowers, leaves, and rice paste sweets shaped like little moons. The air carries the mild sweetness of steamed beans, the grassy scent of newly cut reeds, and faint traces of ash from a small fire pit that keeps water warm for tea. You step closer, drawn by the domestic gravity of shared work. A woman with a soft-lined face beckons you to sit, pressing a square of fabric into your hands. On the table before you lie heaps of slender leaves, ginkgo, maple, chestnut, each washed and sorted by size. Their colors range from pale butter yellow to the deep red of dried persimmons. A bowl of thin paste glimmers in the lamplight, and nearby flat cakes of pressed rice flour rest like smooth stones. The task, someone gestures, is simple: fold, layer, and decorate. You join the circle. The work begins quietly. Hands dip leaves into paste, press them onto the rice cakes, and sprinkle a few grains of sugar or a petal of chrysanthemum on top. The sweets are not for eating tonight. They are offerings, small edible poems meant to catch the attention of the ancestors when dawn arrives. You find the motion soothing, repetitive without being dull, like tracing a familiar word until it loses its sharpness and becomes rhythm instead of meaning. Across the table, a child hums under his breath, the tune repeating every few beats. The elders occasionally correct a fold or smooth an edge, but no one rushes or scolds. Around them, the night expands in patient circles. The soft scrape of bowls, the faint slap of damp leaves, the low creak of the wooden floor, they replace the mental noise you carried here until you realize you haven't thought of your phone or your to-do list for several long minutes. That absence feels like a luxury. A small pile of finished offerings grows at your elbow, their colors gently chaotic but pleasing. Someone slides a fresh tray toward you, and you see how each person's creations carry a signature without needing names. The elderly man's cakes are austere, geometric, precisely balanced. The child's are bright accidents of color and texture. Yours are uncertain, slightly uneven, yet no one seems to mind. The imperfection is simply folded into the larger harmony of the task, another tone in the quiet music of the room. Now the children fetch thin paper sheets and begin folding them into miniature garments, robes, sandals, small hats, each brushed with inked symbols before being set aside. These too will burn before dawn, carried upward as smoke gifts to those beyond reach. Watching them, you feel something loosen in your chest, the old tension of trying to keep hold of every moment, every person, every version of yourself. The paper folds itself into release. The smoke will rise, unresisted. Outside the doorway, you catch glimpses of other courtyards glowing with similar activity. The whole village hums with these small acts of devotion, scattered lights on a vast canvas of dark hills. None of it feels grand enough to demand reverence, yet the combined effect is almost orchestral, each home a quiet instrument contributing its part to the night's slow crescendo toward balance. A breeze moves through the courtyard, stirring the hanging decorations. One lantern sways close enough for you to see the faint script brushed across its paper skin, words of remembrance, a family's simple message to their dead. The ink has bled slightly into the fibers, softening the edges as though even written language must surrender its precision tonight. You touch the fabric in your lap, now marked with flecks of paste and fallen petals, and realize your hands have adopted the same unhurried calm that filled the temple earlier. Someone sets down a tray of tea, the steam rising in fragrant curls that twist through the lamplight. Cups are passed, heads bow in brief acknowledgement, and a deep collective exhale follows. The woman beside you raises her cup slightly toward the unseen night beyond the courtyard fence, a gesture of inclusion for whoever might be listening on the other side of existence. You follow her lead. The tea is earthy and faintly bitter, grounding. It tastes like patience. The last cakes are arranged, the last folds tied. Around you, people begin to tidy the space, stacking bowls, sweeping stray leaves into neat piles. A child yawns, earning a fond smile from every direction. The brazier's coals glow lower, dimmer, steady as heartbeats. You feel a small, pleasant heaviness in your limbs, the kind that follows honest work done without hurry or competition. When you finally step back into the lane, the air feels different, sweeter perhaps, or simply clearer. Your hands still carry the faint scent of leaves and sugar, the memory of smooth paste and soft laughter. Above, the lanterns bob in a light wind, each one holding a quiet pulse of gold that seems to echo what your body has learned tonight. That peace is rarely loud. That balance begins not in grand decisions, but in the slow, repeated folding of small, tender things. You walk on, buoyed by the small, steady warmth of tea and shared work, until the lanes begin to narrow and quiet again. The larger courtyards fall behind you, replaced by simpler wooden fences and small dark gardens. Lanterns thicken here, hanging lower, their light gentler, as if this part of the village has agreed to speak in whispers only. The ground tilts downward, carrying you toward the murmuring thread of water you heard when you first arrived. The river appears between two low houses, more stream than grand current, its surface holding fragmented reflections of stars and lanterns like scattered coins. Over it spans a small stone bridge, just wide enough for people to cross in single file. The bridge rails are low, worn smooth by many palms, and you can feel the faint chill they carry from the air and the stone beneath. On one side of the riverbank stands a small cluster of statues, rounded and modest, each wrapped in a faded cloth bib lovingly replaced whenever it frays. Someone has tucked fresh flowers into the crook of one little stone arm. This place hums with a quieter intent than the busy courtyards. The air feels thinner, strained of distraction. Here, the equinox is not only about greeting ancestors and thanking fields, it becomes something more inward, a hinge not just in the year, but in you. This is Higan, the shore beyond. Not a distant paradise reached by accumulating virtue badges like some cosmic loyalty program, but a state of balance that feels embarrassingly simple when you are not busy overcomplicating your own life. On your side of the river lies the usual shore, Shigan, the land of restlessness, deadlines, half-slept nights, the familiar rotation of self-criticism and overthinking. You know this terrain far too well. On the other side, symbolically at least, waits Higan, the other shore, where minds are clearer, hearts lighter, and people somehow manage to exist without mentally drafting emails while brushing their teeth. Tonight, this narrow bridge becomes the line between those two states, drawn small enough that you can cross it in a handful of steps, yet deep enough that it asks you to reconsider the weight you are carrying. At a low stone bench, you see a basket of smooth river stones, each one pale and cool, and next to it, a small dish with ink and simple brushes. The task here is direct, almost disarmingly so. Take a stone, consider a worry, and mark it. Not poetically, not dramatically, just enough to recognize it. You pick one up, its surface cool against your palm, and feel your brain immediately try to turn this into a performance. How to choose the most meaningful anxiety, how to phrase it perfectly, how to optimize this moment of release for maximum therapeutic effect. And then, perhaps because the night has slowly been training you out of that reflex, you stop. You let the ink brush rest in your fingers, not as a tool of self-improvement, but as a way to admit, quietly, that something has been hard. Maybe you mark the shape of a deadline that has been chewing at your sleep, or a heaviness in your chest you cannot quite name, or the constant hum of not feeling good enough no matter how much you achieve. The characters may be clumsy, or perhaps you choose only a simple line, a dot, a symbol that means something only to you. It is enough. One by one, you add more stones to the small growing pile at your feet. No one demands that you fix these worries tonight. No grand revelation swoops in. You are not transforming into a glowing, enlightened being with perfect posture and infinite patience. You are just admitting what you carry, and that, absurdly, already feels like crossing half the distance. Each stone is a small, tactile truth, not a catastrophic prediction, not an endless mental replay, just a solid thing you can pick up and put down. When the pile feels complete, you cradle the stones in both hands. They are not heavy individually, but together they carry the familiar weight of everything you demand of yourself in a normal week. You step onto the bridge. The river rustles beneath, a constant, unbothered sound. Halfway across, you pause. Lanterns sway behind you. Ahead, the bank waits, dim and still. This is the symbolic center line, the place where, in stories, people make vows or receive revelations. You, being human, mostly feel your knees and the slight chill sneaking through your clothing. Then you lower your hands. One by one, you place the stones along the low ledge of the far rail, not hurling them into the water in some dramatic act of erasure, but laying them down carefully, as if returning borrowed objects. They will stay here for the night, kept company by countless stones from years past whose ink has long washed away. The worries they represented did not become miracles. Some resolved, some did not, but the act of setting them down was still real. You feel your shoulders release a fraction of their constant brace, like a muscle given permission to unclench. On the other side of the river stands a small wooden post, with slips of paper tied to it in rows. Some bear wishes, others thanks, all faintly fluttering whenever the breeze stirs. You add your own tie, perhaps a word of gratitude for having made it this far in the year without completely falling apart, or perhaps a simple request for enough steadiness to continue. The paper flutters, joining the quiet chorus of hundreds of other hopes and acknowledgments, none of them perfect, all of them allowed. As you turn back toward the village, the bridge lies behind you, the stone rail now lined with the mute silhouettes of your ink-marked worries. They have not vanished. Life will still be waiting with its messy mix of tenderness and chaos. But you have carved a tiny symbolic line in time, a moment when you acknowledge that you can't keep everything balanced in your head alone, that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is admit you are tired and set a little weight down on a riverbank in your imagination. The night breathes around you, cool and steady, and with each step up from the water's edge, you feel as if you are walking just a little on the other shore. You leave the riverside path with your hands a little emptier and your chest a little lighter, following the gentle slope back toward the cluster of roofs. The village no longer feels like a place you are visiting. It feels like a quiet room inside yourself, one where your thoughts instinctively lower their volume. Somewhere a bell sounds once, then again, measuring out the night with patient notes. As you step into a small open square near the center of the settlement, you notice that the air has changed. It is not colder, exactly, but it carries a sharper edge, the faint metallic taste of weather about to turn. Lantern flames flicker with more insistence, tugged sideways by gusts that arrive without warning and vanish just as quickly. Your skin, which has only just begun to forget the day's stress, tightens again. Your body recognizes this shift before your mind remembers to worry. Above the dark line of the roofs, the harvest moon should be rising in clean, rounded confidence. Instead, it appears behind a thickening veil of cloud, a blurred disk rather than a polished coin. The light that reaches the valley is diffused and uncertain, the kind of glow that suggests the sky is not fully committed to this whole peaceful autumn evening idea. Around you, people who had been moving at their usual unhurried pace begin to glance upward more often. Hands still carry trays and tools, but shoulders tighten, steps grow a little shorter. The equinox rites will continue no matter what the sky decides to do, but the rice fields hugging the valley's edges are another story. Too much wind or rain at the wrong moment, and months of careful labor can collapse in a single, uninterested hour. You sense the worry in the silence between words, in the way an elder pauses a fraction longer before setting a tray down, in the quick, measuring look a farmer gives the dark terraces. The village is not panicking. It has learned that storms do not listen to panic. Still, a thin wire of tension hums beneath the evening's calm. This night holds not only symbolic balance, but also a practical, fragile one. Even your own chest tightens in sympathy, running its favorite script about how everything good is always one surprise away from being ruined. A stronger gust sweeps through the square. Lanterns swing wide, their handles creaking softly. One flame gutters, shrinking to a thread before flaring back. Another goes out entirely, leaving its paper shell dull. Nearby, a hand lifts to shield a lantern, body folding around it to form a windbreak. Others adjust hooks and ropes, shortening lines so the lights sway less like nervous thoughts and more like anchored stars. The adjustments are small, but together they form a quiet answer. If the sky grows unpredictable, people will simply become more deliberate. Far up the slope, near the temple precinct, the silhouettes of cedars bend and straighten, their tops twisting into blurred shapes against the dim sky. Clouds thicken behind them, moving faster than feels polite. The moon slips in and out of sight, alternately present and hidden, as if it cannot decide whether to attend the ceremony or leave early. You recognize the energy instantly. It is the cosmic version of your own habit of wavering between commitment and escape whenever life asks you to show up fully. Despite the rising wind, the preparations do not stop. They shift. A group of villagers secures wooden shutters with practiced movements. Another gathers cloth coverings for smaller altars, so offerings will not be washed away if the sky decides on drama. In one courtyard, bundles of straw are slid under deeper eaves. No one runs. No one shouts. The village simply moves at a slightly quicker tempo, as if the night's heartbeat has accelerated by half a step. You find yourself helping without being asked, steadying a lantern, lifting a tray, following gestures rather than instructions, and your mind, which usually spirals helplessly around problems it cannot touch, takes an unfamiliar comfort in being quietly, physically useful. From the edge of the square, you notice a small group assembling near the path that leads to the fields. Farmers with ropes coiled over their shoulders, charms carved from wood, bundles of straw to reinforce weak spots. Their faces are turned toward the dark terraces, bodies already leaning into the work ahead. The problem tonight is no longer an abstract imbalance in your head. It is wind, cloud, and the delicate heads of grain bending under forces they did not agree to. As the first fine droplets touch your skin, still more in tension than rain, the valley feels like a deep bowl waiting to see what the sky will pour into it. Lanterns continue to burn in the restless air, small circles of light that suddenly seem even more precious, and somewhere beyond the last house, those quiet figures begin walking the ridges, carrying with them the village's stubborn hope that whatever storm comes will pass gently enough to leave both crops and rituals standing. You drift toward the edge of the village with the others, more instinct than decision, following narrow lanes where houses lean together and offer their walls to the wind. The air carries wet earth and stone, that faint metallic taste that means the sky is thinking about trouble. Lanterns thin out behind you, their glow shrinking as darkness gathers ahead. Beyond the last fence, the terraces open in wide, dark steps. Earlier, they felt like a gentle painting. Now they resemble a series of exposed ribs. Bowed grain shivers under each gust, taking the wind full on its narrow shoulders. Lanterns stand at intervals along the ridges, halos blurred by mist, and between them shapes move slowly, bending and straightening with stubborn calm. You step down onto the first earthen ridge. The top layer of soil has loosened into slick mud that insists you pay attention. Water gleams in the paddies on either side, catching stray light in thin, nervous lines. Up above, the clouds roll over one another with a low, restless sound that you feel in your chest more than hear with your ears. At a narrow gap where water passes from one paddy to the next, careful hands clear clogged stalks from a small wooden gate. Straw is pressed into gaps, extra stones nudged into place where the earth has slumped. It is not heroic work. No one will paint this scene on a screen, but if heavy rain comes, these small adjustments will decide whether water flows or tears straight through. As you follow the ridge, you notice charms marking the field like quiet punctuation. Thin wooden plaques stand at corners, inked characters dark against pale grain. Straw bundles shaped into simple figures keep watch by irrigation channels. Strips of cloth twitch on sticks along the outer edge, turning invisible gusts into visible movement. They cannot wrestle the weather into kindness, but they hold the village's intention in place. You keep walking with the others, arms tilting now and then for balance, shoes gaining an extra wobbling layer of mud. Compared to this, your usual disasters, emails, meetings, the slow drip of self-doubt, seem oddly abstract. Here, the problem is blunt. Wind, water, soil. The response is equally blunt. Reinforce what you can, keep an eye on the rest, stay with it instead of spiraling in your head. The wind tightens. Lanterns sway hard, flames pinched thin, then swelling again. The sound of the valley shifts. The chorus of insects sinks beneath the hiss of air pushing over grain. Stalks tap against each other, a soft rattle repeating along the terraces like beads sliding along a cord. For a moment, the whole slope feels as if it is inhaling and holding its breath. You reach the outermost terrace, where the fields drop into a deeper black of trees and rock. Here, straw ropes are thicker, knots pulled firm. Small stacks of rounded stones rise from the ridge at intervals, just high enough to feel underfoot. Someone adds another stone to a pile, a tiny, almost silly gesture against the size of the sky. Yet it lands in you like a proof that care is still being taken. It occurs to you that this is what prayer looks like when it puts its boots on. No special pose, no tidy words, just motion. Step after step along the boundary, fingers on knots, eyes searching for weak seams. Each circuit of the terraces forms a wordless sentence that repeats quietly in the dark. Let this be enough. Let what we have grown see the morning. Rain finally comes, but it refuses the drama your mind was braced for. A sprinkle first, cool dots on your hands and neck, then a thicker scatter that never quite becomes a sheet. The wind surges once with real force, testing the ropes and the wet banks, then eases into a steady push. The sky seems to decide that somewhere else will be easier to bully tonight. You finish the loop with legs pleasantly heavy, breath a little deeper than usual. Terraces checked, gates cleared, charms standing where they should. There is no triumphant moment, only a quiet absence. No broken banks, no shredded fields, nothing to add to the long list of things gone wrong. Behind you, the paddies sink into a damp, relieved hush, like someone who feels a hand on their shoulder at last. Climbing back toward the houses, you realize how rarely you offer yourself this kind of watchfulness. When storms gather in your mind, you tend either to ignore them or sit still while your thoughts flood every low place. Out here, in mud and wind, you have practiced another pattern. Walk the edges, notice the cracks, do the small things that can be done, and accept for one night that this is already a tender, stubborn kind of protection. You return to the village with mud soft on your soles and a faint chill resting on your cheeks. The wind that earlier leaned hard against the fields has quieted into something absent-minded, only nudging the lanterns now and then, so their light sways in small, sleepy arcs. The drizzle has passed, leaving roofs, leaves, and stone dark and shining, as if the valley has just been rinsed and carefully put back in its place. From higher up the slope, a drum begins to sound. The tone is low and rounded, each beat wrapped in a long pause that refuses to hurry. It rolls down through trees and houses and ribs, and before you have time to overthink anything, your own pulse has quietly slipped into time with that slow, deliberate rhythm, like a tired runner finally deciding to walk. You follow the sound uphill. Stone steps lift under your feet, their worn centers holding tiny pools of water that flash whenever a lantern's halo passes. With each climb, the village noise thins. Pots, stray voices, a closing door, until, at the temple gate, it falls away altogether. You pass under the twisted straw rope and paper streamers, and the world suddenly narrows to cedar trunks, cool stone, and the patient drum above you. Inside the precinct, lanterns hang closer together, turning the darkness into a deep, muted amber rather than a void. Shadows gather under the eaves like folded blankets. The air is cooler here, edged with cedar resin and the slow mineral breath of old stone that has stood through more autumns than you will ever see. Your lungs quietly lengthen their inhales, as if they have finally found a pace that makes sense. At the center waits the inner courtyard, a square of swept flagstones framed by wooden galleries. People sit or kneel along the edges, sleeves folded over hands, backs rounded in the same small curve of attention. Before the main hall, the evening's work has become an ordered front of offerings. Rice cakes you help decorate, fruits in bright, simple mounds, folded paper garments, bundles of grain bound with straw from the fields you walked. Thin streams of incense rise from bronze burners and twist into a single pale column that disappears straight into the night. You take a place near the back on a cushion that has known many knees. The shrine doors stand slightly open, warm darkness breathing out from within. To one side, the drum waits broad and calm, its skin catching small crescents of light. When the beater touches it again, the sound feels less like impact and more like a quiet tap at your bones. A reminder that you are here in this slice of time, not stuck inside imaginary disasters 3 weeks from now. Low chanting begins, almost below the volume at which your thoughts usually shout. It is not dramatic. It moves in slow, steady lines from chest to chest. You do not follow every word, but your body follows the rhythm easily. The chant pours over you like warm water, rounding the sharp corners of your day until they feel less capable of cutting anything. including you. Sound and smoke braid together, and the night seems to thin at the edges. You sense that this courtyard holds more than the people now kneeling on its stones. Even without trying, your mind stacks older evenings on top of this one. Different faces in these places, different hands arranging similar offerings, different lists of worries folded into different ribs. Harvests have failed and flourished, storms have spared or damaged, yet the drum, the chant, and the incense keep rising from this square with stubborn regularity. The offerings are named for ancestors and the dead, but the act of offering quietly rearranges the living, tugging them out of lonely orbit and back into a line that stretches unseen behind and ahead. The incense thickens, sweetness edged with a faint sting that brings water to your eyes. Lanterns soften into halos, and if a few tears slip loose, the night sensibly refuses to comment. Around you, bodies bow, foreheads moving toward stone. You follow, not because you have decoded every layer of symbolism, but because your muscles remember something your mind keeps forgetting. Sometimes the wisest move is to be smaller than your problems for a while and let something else hold the weight. The bell sounds. Wood meets metal, and a long, low note opens like a slow door in the air. It moves outward and downward, slides through your spine, and rises again into the sky, taking with it a thin crust of your restlessness. Chant and drum fade, silence settles, dense and soft, full of everything just said without words. In that stillness, it feels as if an invisible load has been shifted from your shoulders to the wide, steady plain of the courtyard stones. When hems finally rustle and knees straighten, you rise with the others, legs tingling, head a little light, the night around you unchanged and yet entirely different, as though some hidden knot has loosened in the dark, and now the temple, the valley, and your own tired chest all have a little more room to breathe. You step out from the inner courtyard into air that feels thinner, as if the night has exhaled most of what it needed to say. The chanting has faded. The bell's last note lingers only as a memory in your chest. Lanterns still glow along the eaves, but their light seems gentler now, less like an invitation and more like a promise that no one will have to walk back through the darkness alone. Down the temple steps, the village has taken on a hushed, uncertain quality. It is not quite night anymore, but dawn has not yet committed to showing up. The sky over the mountains has begun to pale at its edges, trading black for a washed-out indigo that only hints at what is coming. In this in-between hour, your body does its usual modern thing and suggests caffeine, a screen, and a doom scroll, but the valley has other plans. Following the murmur of movement, you reach a long, low building tucked against the slope. Its doors stand open to the cool air, releasing a soft glow that spills onto the packed earth. Inside, woven mats cover the floor in neat rows. People sit cross-legged or with legs folded to one side, shoulders wrapped in shawls. There is tiredness here, but it is the right kind, the weight that comes from doing enough and doing it together. You slip off your shoes and step onto the tatami. The plant fibers spring faintly under your weight, holding the night's footprints like pressed grass. Along the center of the room, low tables form a continuous line. On them sit bowls of rice, simmered vegetables, pickles in modest splashes of color, and steaming pots whose lids rattle now and then as someone checks their contents. Cups wait in tidy rows, turned upside down like small shells. Steam rises from kettles, carrying the deep, green scent of tea through the room. It threads into your nose and tugs at the part of your brain that equates warmth in the hands with calm in the mind. You settle onto the mat, knees negotiating with the posture, and feel the slow, collective exhale that passes through the room as everyone finally lets their muscles soften. Bowls move from hand to hand. Rice settles into them with a small, satisfying weight. Ladles dip into miso and vegetables that have been quietly prepared while you walked fields and climbed steps. Pickles click gently against porcelain, bright, sour punctuation for milder flavors. Nothing here is designed to impress an audience. This is food meant to do the unglamorous work of carrying everyone's tired cells safely into morning. You lift your own bowl and feel its warmth seep into your fingers. The first mouthful is almost comically comforting. Soft, hot, slightly sweet rice that seems to address all the small indignities you have accumulated without you noticing. Muscles you did not realize were clenched begin to negotiate a truce. Your brain, always eager to multitask, briefly tries to turn this into a productivity hack, but the steam and flavor blur that impulse until it fades. For once, you are simply eating, not optimizing. Around you, the low murmur of conversation moves in waves, never needing to rise. People trade a few words, a quiet laugh, a stretch of companionable silence. Faces that earlier were tight with worry about clouds and wind now carry a softer ease. The storm visited, tested the valley, and then moved on. The fields are still standing. The offerings have been laid. For tonight, that is enough. Someone refills your tea before you can decide whether to ask. A child nods over a half-finished bowl and is gently steadied. The room breathes in a slow rhythm that needs no planning app or reminder notification. Bodies simply respond to one another's needs because that is what they have practiced into habit. Your own breathing falls into step with theirs. Inhale with steam, exhale with warmth spreading from your stomach. The earlier images of ink-marked stones, bowed rice heads in the wind, and lanterns swaying on their hooks line up inside you like episodes from the same long story. What felt at the start of the night like separate concerns, your private worries, the village's harvest, the turning season, now feel braided together into one resilient, slightly frayed rope. You are not the hero of this night. You are simply one more tired person sharing food after work and weather. As the pots empty and bowls settle back onto tables with small, hollow thuds, the room eases into a softer silence. Outside, the first faint notes of bird song slip into the fading darkness. You wrap your arms loosely around your knees in simple animal satisfaction. However chaotic your waking life may be when you return to it, this pre-dawn room will keep existing somewhere in you, a memory of mats and steam, and the realization that sometimes survival looks exactly like this. Staying up a little too late with others, eating plain food, and letting the sharp edges of fear dissolve into the shared, sleepy warmth of almost morning. You linger for a moment in the soft, drowsy warmth of the shared room, but the night is already loosening its hold. Mats rustle, joints complain in quiet stretches, and doors slide aside to admit a breath of air that is thinner and colder than before. Your body feels pleasantly heavy. Your mind tries to flare back into its usual alertness, but the valley has worn it down to a manageable hum. You find yourself climbing toward the temple again, not because anyone expects it of you, but because some quieter part of you wants to see how this night you have walked through decides to end. Stone steps rise in front of you, their damp surfaces cool under your soles. Your breathing finds an easy rhythm with the climb, no longer the shallow, jittery kind you bring to your inbox, but something slower and steadier, as if the valley has tuned your lungs to its own tempo. At the gate, the twisted straw rope wears a necklace of tiny droplets, each one catching lantern light in brief, sleepy flashes. Paper streamers hang limp, pale strokes against the dark wood. Beyond, the courtyard lies still. A few lanterns remain near the main hall, their flames small and steady, doing just enough work to keep shadows from hardening. The last sticks of incense send out low ribbons of smoke that travel sideways instead of up, as if even they are ready to lie down. You step into that cooled air and feel it slide into your lungs, brisk but not harsh. Above the temple roofline, the first suggestion of morning appears along the mountain ridge. It is not dramatic, no instant blaze of orange, no cinematic spotlight on your personal growth arc, just a narrow band of pale color easing into being. Dark cedar silhouettes stand in front of it, unmoving, their branches cut cleanly out of the brightening strip like ink strokes on a scroll. You settle on the veranda, back against a wooden pillar, feet hovering just above the stone. Muscles complain for a moment and then decide this position will do. Your body carries the honest fatigue of walking fields in the wind, folding offerings, and sitting through chanting on hard surfaces. Your mind carries the more familiar exhaustion of too many expectations and too little rest. Yet here, for once, the physical tiredness is louder, and the mental noise has been demoted to background static. As the pale band along the horizon widens, the courtyard holds both worlds at once. In one direction, the lingering lanterns and curling smoke still belong to night. In the other, shadows begin to thin, and the stone shows its true color instead of pretending to be darkness. For a few minutes, neither side wins. Light and dark share the space like two guests who have finally learned to sit at the same table without arguing. You begin to notice your own breathing in that same middle ground. Inhale, exhale. No heroic deep breathing exercise, no dramatic sighs for effect, just an even, forgettable rhythm. It is the kind of breathing you rarely allow yourself because you are usually too busy predicting disasters or rehearsing conversations that may never happen. Now, however, your lungs have convinced your brain to follow the valley's example, neither clinging to the night's worries nor rushing ahead into tomorrow's problems, simply balancing on the thin line of this moment. From somewhere inside the temple, bells ring again. The sequence is gentler than the earlier summons, notes spaced wide apart as if even the metal is stretching after a long sit. Each tone unfurls into the air and drifts down the slope, touching roofs, trees, and the damp terraces you walked in the wind. You imagine it reaching the stone bridge where your ink-marked worries now rest, brushing past them without needing to erase anything, just reminding them that they too belong to a larger rhythm. The sound arrives where you sit and seems to nudge your ribs from the inside, asking them to keep moving in that same steady cadence. The first true ray of sunlight reaches over the mountain line at last, thin but certain. It grazes the tips of the cedars, turning droplets on their needles into brief sparks, then slides down to catch on the temple's eaves, the braided rope, and the edges of carved stone. It does not explode across the valley. It advances in patient increments, as if testing each surface before committing. Watching it, you recognize your own shift over the night. You did not leap from anxiety to peace in one dramatic transformation. You crossed small internal ridges, laid down worries like stones on a riverbank, walked fields in the wind, sat through chants, and shared bowls of rice. Now, as light finally meets the courtyard stones at your feet, you realize your breathing has arrived here too. No longer tilted wildly toward fear or numbness, but resting, for this brief equinox moment, on the quiet, level ground between them. You rise from the veranda when sunlight has fully settled over the courtyard stones, not because anyone tells you to move, but because the day itself gently, patiently nudges you onward. The lanterns that guarded the night look faint and shy in this brightness, their small flames almost embarrassed to still exist. One by one, careful fingers snuff them out, not as a rejection of darkness, but as a soft thank you for a job done well. Their last thin spirals of smoke drift upward and vanish into the clean morning air, like the final notes of a lullaby that knows when to stop. You descend the temple steps with the slow stiffness of someone who has walked more than just a hillside. Your legs remember fields and ridges, your knees remember stone, and your back remembers every time you bowed a little deeper than your posture would normally approve. The path into the village feels familiar now. Each crack in the stone, each tuft of moss seems lightly underlined, as if the valley is making sure you really see it before you go. In daylight, nothing is polished into perfection. Rough beams, patched tiles, and scuffed thresholds all show themselves clearly, and somehow the honesty is more comforting than any postcard image. The village is already quietly slipping back into its everyday skin. Doors slide open, bedding appears on lines, fluttering like sleepy flags of truce. Smoke rises from hearths in straight, confident lines, instead of the fragile threads of the night. Somewhere, a pot lid clatters, a broom taps against a step, a rooster enthusiastically ruins the mood. The equinox is technically over, yet its echo lingers in the way people move, slightly slower, slightly softer, like a song that has ended but still hums along your bones. You wander the lanes you crossed in lantern light only hours ago. Now they show their working parts: stacked buckets, coiled ropes, bundles of firewood leaning like drowsy sentries under eaves. Fallen leaves are everywhere, caught in corners, patched damply to stone, collecting along fence lines. Their colors, while less dramatic than last night's fiery reds and golds, still carry a muted warmth, as if they remember having once been brilliant. They wait for brooms and feet to move them along, proof that even beauty has a small, untidy phase on its way back into the soil. At one threshold you pause. The low platform used for offerings sits nearby, bowls now mostly emptied. Rice clings in thin rings around the edges, fruits show tiny beak marks and nibbles, and the incense has curled into pale ash mounds that hold the faintest shape of the sticks they once were. Nothing about it feels like waste. Whatever could be eaten has been eaten, whatever could rise has risen, whatever needed to be said without words has been said. The sacred has quietly stepped aside so breakfast can happen in the same space. In a courtyard you recognize, the elders and children from last night are already dismantling the set of the ritual. Trays are washed, petals and scraps swept into small heaps, ash from burned paper gently gathered. Up close you can still see faint traces in the ash, the edge of a folded sleeve, the corner of a tiny imagined sandal, the ghost of symbols that meant thank you and please take care of us a little longer. This too will be released, scattered into a field maybe, carried by rain into soil, and then taken up again by roots that do not know they are holding someone's wish. Even memory here is given somewhere to go. A little farther on, cloths flutter from a fence line. Among them hangs the square you used as a work mat, newly washed, edges rippling in the breeze. The stains are mostly gone, but a faint shadow of color lingers, like the outline of last night's focus. It strikes you that while physical traces fade, the way your attention moved has shifted in a more lasting way. You learned, however briefly, to treat small tasks as if they mattered, to let repetition calm you instead of bore you, to put certain anxieties onto stone instead of looping them endlessly in your head. Those lessons are awkward and imperfect, but they are coming with you whether you invite them or not. In the main square, normal life is warming up. Barrels roll across the packed ground, baskets are hoisted, a cart is inspected with the serious frown of someone who knows exactly how annoying a broken wheel can be. Yet the night has left tiny fingerprints. A single lantern remains under an eave, unlit but still swaying as if it has not quite accepted that its shift is over. A wooden tablet with hurried ink leans against a post, perhaps forgotten, perhaps intentionally left to fade in the weather. These remnants are not trying to keep the night alive, they simply prove that it happened. The way the ache in your legs proves you actually walked those muddy ridges and did not just imagine them. Eventually, the village begins to thin. Houses stand farther apart, fields push their way back into the horizon. The sky has settled into a soft autumn blue, with a few thinning clouds drifting lazily as if they've decided to spend the rest of the season simply looking pretty instead of threatening destruction. A mild breeze carries the smell of damp earth and straw and something faintly smoky, and it plays with your sleeves in that way that says, politely but firmly, that it is time to go. You keep your farewells small and human-sized, a nod to the woman whose steady hands guided your clumsy folding, a half bow directed toward the farmer you trailed along the ridge, your footprints clumsy beside decades of his, a lifted hand to the child now racing down a lane, ceremony forgotten, laughter replacing composure. None of these gestures try to summarize what the night has meant. They are acknowledgments, not speeches. Simple ways of saying thank you for letting me exist inside your rhythm for a little while. When your feet finally turn toward the mountain path, there is no dramatic music, no slow-motion shot of you silhouetted against the sky. There is only the gentle truth that leaving is part of belonging. You cannot stay here forever, preserved in soft lantern light, hiding from invoices and notifications and all the small frictions waiting for you outside this valley. The point was never to escape your life permanently. The point was to remember in your body that another way of moving through it is possible, that somewhere inside you there is a temple courtyard, A stone bridge lined with worries you dared to set down, a field that survived the wind, and a night when ancestors felt close enough to lean on. As the village shrinks behind you into clustered roofs and thin threads of smoke, you realize that although your steps are carrying you away, something has quietly decided to stay. And something else, something a little steadier, a little kinder, is walking back with you. The mountain path receives you again, the same one that carried you down into the valley, now gently guiding you back out. Morning gathers properly around you, no longer tentative. The sky is a soft, steady blue, washed clean by the night's thin rain. Sunlight slips between branches and lands in irregular patches across the trail, so that your steps alternate between warmth and coolness, like a quiet reminder that even now you move between light and shadow with every few paces. Behind you, the village has already begun the slow process of dissolving into distance. Roofs compress into a single patch of dark geometry. Smoke threads lift and flatten until they look like faint handwriting across the sky. If you glance back, you can still pick out the temple's roofline and the long shape of the building where you shared food, but each time you turn your head forward again, those details blur a little more. The valley is tucking itself away, not because it is rejecting you, but because part of its work is to stay where it is while you go where you must. You walk, and with every step, pieces of the night rearrange themselves inside you. The lantern-lit lanes and folded offerings, the ink-marked stones lined along the bridge rail, the bowed rice stalk standing up to the wind, the bell that rolled through your ribs in one long note, they no longer feel like separate scenes. They fuse into a single, slow gesture your body now understands without needing subtitles. You did not receive any grand revelation, no celestial banner unfurled to explain your life plan in bullet points. What you received instead is quieter and, annoyingly, more useful. Proof that balance does not arrive as a sudden upgrade, but as a series of practiced, imperfect motions you repeat on nights like this. The path steepens and your legs complain, but in a straightforward, honest way. This is the kind of fatigue you can trust. You have walked muddy ridges and stone steps and sat on hard floors, and your muscles are simply filing their report. Your usual exhaustion, the mental kind that feels like being slowly erased by endless demands, is still there, but it now has something to lean against. It has the memory of your hands calmly folding leaves into offerings, of worrying less about doing it perfectly and more about simply doing it. It has the stored sensation of placing a stone onto the bridge rail and admitting that you are tired of carrying everything alone. As the valley shrinks behind you, your thoughts, usually so eager to sprint into future disasters, begin to circle back to what waits in your waking life. There will still be messages, requests, and the occasional crisis that arrives with the tact of a falling brick. People will still expect more from you than you feel able to give. You will still wake some mornings already behind. The Equinox does not pretend otherwise. It never promised that the world outside would become kinder overnight. It only offered you a rehearsal for moving through that world without letting it hollow you out completely. You remember the farmers walking the terraces in the wind, checking the edges, reinforcing weak spots with straw and stone. None of them stood in the middle of the field shouting at the sky, demanding a guarantee. They simply did what could be done and stayed present for the rest. You realize that you have your own version of those ridges, boundaries, habits, Small acts of care you can walk around and strengthen when your internal weather turns sharp. A glass of water before another hour of scrolling. One honest message instead of 12 drafted avoidance texts. 5 quiet breaths at the end of a day that tries to convince you there is no time to breathe at all. You think of the bridge again, the thin line between restless shore and the other side that people call Higan. In the valley, it is a literal structure of stone and rail and water below. In your life, it is less visible, but no less real. The moment you admit that you are overwhelmed, the moment you choose to set one task down instead of stacking 5 more on top of it, the moment you look at your own tired reflection and decide that perhaps it is worth treating this person with the same gentleness you offered to strangers in a story about ancient autumn rituals. Crossing that bridge will not be a one-time cinematic event. It will be something you do again and again, sometimes clumsily, sometimes halfway, sometimes without realizing until you are already standing on the other side. The path brings you to a small rise where you can see the valley one last time. It lies below like a folded memory, terraces etched into the hillside, the river a faint line of silver, the roofs pressed together in a dark, careful cluster. In daylight, it looks more ordinary than it ever did under lanterns and moon, and that is precisely what makes it precious. This place is not a dream built to impress you. It is a working valley that hosts its rituals in between harvest schedules and weather reports. Its beauty is not separate from its effort. You close your eyes for a breath and store the scene the way you might save a photograph, except this one is made of sensations instead of pixels. The roughness of straw ropes under your fingers, the smell of pine incense curling into cool air, the feel of tatami under sore knees, the taste of plain rice at almost morning, the sound of a bell letting the night know it has been seen. You are not freezing these things in amber. You are simply tucking them into a reachable pocket of your mind. When you open your eyes, the valley is still there, but you no longer need to stare at it to hold it. You turn away and continue along the path, each step taking you toward the unglamorous, necessary mess of your everyday life. The worries you left on the bridge will wait for you in different forms. The exhaustion will return, because you are human and you care and you are trying. Yet traveling back, you now carry something the night quietly slipped into your hands. A portable Equinox, a small internal place where lanterns can be lit without rushing, where fields can be checked without panic, where ancestors and future selves share a table, and where you are allowed, on the most ordinary of days, to pause on a narrow inner bridge and set down even one stone before you walk on. The path bends and the valley passes out of sight, and still your breathing stays steady, as if somewhere deep inside the drums are keeping time and the bell is still, very softly, ringing. You keep walking. The path of the story slowly softens now, like soil after rain. And you feel yourself no longer climbing or descending, just resting in a gentle, level stretch, where nothing needs to be earned or justified. The scenes you visited begin to loosen their outlines. Lanterns fading into simple circles of light, rice fields dissolving into a comfortable blur of gold and green, temple roofs flattening into a single dark line against a sky that is neither quite night nor fully day, but something in between, like the last few moments before sleep finally reaches your eyelids. You are still here, listening, breathing, carrying the same heart and bones and tired thoughts you brought with you at the beginning. But now they feel padded, wrapped in a softer layer of air. The worries that used to lean right against your ribs are standing a little farther back, content to wait their turn for once. They have not vanished. They have simply grown quieter, like guests who have finally understood that this is not the time to demand your attention. You have walked them along bridges and terraces, through wind and incense and the gentle, stubborn rhythm of drums. And they have learned, for tonight at least, how to speak in whispers. The valley of ancient Japan sinks comfortably into the distance, not as something lost, but as a room you know how to revisit whenever you close your eyes. You can find it by the sound of water under a wooden bridge, by the feel of a smooth stone in your palm, by the smell of pine smoke curling into cold air, by the memory of rice fields holding steady under an uncertain sky. You do not need elaborate rituals or perfect circumstances. You only need a breath long enough to step, in your mind, from the restless shore to that other bank where things are still and balanced for a moment. As you lie there in your own room, the shadows on your ceiling become distant hills. The faint sounds outside your window turn into crickets and soft bells, and the weight of your blanket settles over you like a calm, familiar night sky. Your chest rises and falls with the same steady cadence that met you in the temple courtyard. Inhale a little warmth, exhale a little tension. Inhale a small piece of that autumn equinox quiet. Exhale the tight grip of the day that tried so hard to hold on. Thoughts may still wander in, but they arrive slower now, softened at the edges, easy to nod to and let drift past. You do not have to do anything more. There are no tasks left inside this story. No fields to walk, no steps to climb, no altars to arrange. You have already arrived where you needed to be, here, in this gentle pause, carried by your own breathing and the last faint echo of a bell across a valley that will keep existing somewhere in you. Let your shoulders sink a little deeper. Let your jaw unclench. Let your eyes grow heavy and stay closed even if one thought tries to pry them open again. The night knows how to hold you now. You have taught it your shape. End of story. Sweet dreams.